Hello, my name is David Cass. I'm president of CISOs Connect, and this is a CISOs Connect podcast. I am joined today by David Dellapelle. David, if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background, and we'll get started.
Great to be here. Thank you, David. I started my career actually in Tel Aviv, which I feel like is such a hub of security innovation. A lot of brilliant innovators coming out of Unit 8200 and Unit 81 in the IDF there. I was working for this AI startup, and it was an amazing experience. I went back to the United States. I worked in management consulting for a bit, and then found myself at two different security startups and helped grow them from Series A all the way through post-Series D. One of them, I think the greatest success story was Perimeter 81, which we took from sub 2 million ARR to over 30 million in a checkpoint acquisition last year. And I saw this massive problem in the industry. I was looking at a lot of data, and I found out that for some reason it's still 80 to 90% of breaches start with social engineering or human behavior within companies. And there's all this incredible innovation happening in the cloud, the endpoint, the network, the identity stacks, but it just doesn't seem to change that fact. And so I was looking at this problem, and I realized that security awareness training is that's the vanguard of security for enterprises. I'm talking Fortune 500 companies. And I realized it's completely ineffective and inefficient for those companies. So that was kind of the premise, and that was the big problem I was looking at initially.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, because security awareness is something we all have to do.
Correct.
It's required if you're highly regulated, things like that, and we often do it quarterly. It can be just training. It could be phishing testing. It can be, and it's always questionable about how effective it is, because we seem to measure that by did you click or did you not click on the email. It doesn't really tell me how much of a true understanding you have of the broader threat landscape. So, from how you guys are addressing it, could you talk about how are you kind of changing the way organizations think about, security awareness?
Yeah, it's really, David, it's a check the box today and again, we're talking the biggest companies. That was what was super surprising for me to understand. Quarterly standardized phishing testing and training modules, I think, are actually counterproductive because it creates this adversarial relationship sometimes between the CISO and the CISOs org and the rest of the user base. So we took a look at this problem. We're like, okay, how do we actually meaningfully make an impact here? How do we truly, for the first time, reduce social engineering risk? And we realized it's ideally, fortunately, we're in this new age of AI, which helps us a lot. But you really have to take a look at this problem and deal with it from a data science perspective. So what we do is we take in all of the relevant data sources about user risk. We quantify user risk at the individual employee level, roll that up to all the other levels, of course. We reduce risk automatically where it can be reduced through things like hyper-targeted, personalized training, just-in-time interventions, a co-pilot that coaches end users throughout their day-to-day. And then for the employees that are proving themselves to be careless or ignorant, which we can also differentiate, we can actually start to adapt security controls around risk profiles. So it's just a different way of looking at the problem. I think a much more effective and efficient solution, and efficient because we're only increasing friction. Security can sometimes increase friction, and we're increasing friction only for the high-risk people in the company and dramatically reducing it for the low-risk people.
So that's very interesting. So you're being able to use AI essentially to effectively create, I guess, scenarios that are unique to the individuals versus, our, I don't want to say cookie cutter is probably the wrong way, but security awareness, privacy training, it tends to be very generic, because you have to kind of cover a broad swath of individuals that may have very different roles. Outside of you might do something specialized for privileged users, but there's still so many roles, within organizations. So I guess, how have you found the results, and what of organizations that you've worked with, how are they kind of embracing this change?
Yeah, pretty much every company that we talk to that's an enterprise company, and we work with mostly mid to large enterprise companies, almost all of them are Proofpoint or KnowBe4 customers for their security awareness training. And what we found is that they've gotten their phish prone percentage, the percent of people that will click on a link, which again is inherently just a very limited data set. It's just one data point, really. So it's not sufficient to truly quantify risk. But what we found is that even if they're fish burn percentages in the single digits, we can immediately, with our baseline risk assessment, because of how customized it is to the person's functions, their level, their company, their geography, their language, we can actually get those numbers up to like 50+% in the first month.
Oh, wow.
During that baseline. So we can actually truly find out where do people sit, and it's not meant to be a gotcha type of platform, but it's really just meant for the CISOs to have this, and security teams and companies to have this power to just understand when the attackers come, which they will, they're going to go for the weak links, which is always the employees, and which employees are more susceptible to that. And the ones that care can actually improve.
No, I mean, that's a great point. And just as a CISO, none of us tend to have unlimited budgets. So how do you think about when I bring something new into my organization, I tend to look across the way and be like, okay, are there other products I can displace with this? So are you seeing that people are being able to move away from other training platforms as they adopt the way that you guys have been addressing it?
Yeah, we have everything in-house, all of our technology. And we uniquely and completely replace that ineffective know before budget. Right. Or Proofpoint with their SAT module. We are starting to take out other budget as well. I think, insider threat is a really interesting one. Mm-hmm. So I think DLP, Purview seems to have such great dominance, right? And we're big, Microsoft fans and, partners with them. But I do think that DLP is starting to become less of an interesting standalone product. And I'm seeing it more embedded within tools like CrowdStrike, within email security tools like Abnormal Security, for example. So I think right now we do replace that security awareness training budget, but I do think we're also tapping into other budgets like a red teaming budget, for example. Or the way we do testing, it's really a red team approach. We're systematically probing for vulnerabilities within this layer of cybersecurity.
Yeah, that's a great point. And for us, as you mentioned, metrics tend to be important of like how are we managing and measuring our progress. So by doing this, I guess, tailored type of approach, how are you able to kind of generate more effective measurements other than saying X% didn't click on the phishing?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy here, but it's almost like what the data that CISOs, and again, the top industry leading CISOs have access to in terms of user risk today is, again, limited to a single click, right? It's like a single sensor. And so what we have built is all 5 senses and the brain, right? I think that's probably the best analogy. And I think a good example here is, let's say a user named John, and John is in finance, in accounts payable, right? So our AI, we have a language model that we've built custom that can say, okay, this person, even if he has a disparate title that's not quite there, our AI can run cosine analysis and determine, okay, this person probably has access to moving money, right? So we can assume he has a higher level of risk from day one. Step 2 is we'll send him hyper-specific invoices from the company's top vendors, right? Automatically, we'll do that. The third step, and so, hyper-specific testing. The third step is we can actually start to pull in via API read-only from CrowdStrike or from the endpoint, from the HRS, from the email, and from DLP solutions. We can start to also pull in, how is this person actually behaving day to day, right? So, and we're also running access and permissions analysis, right, within Okta or Entra. So is he actually over permission? He has a very high risk profile and he's really careless in his day to day. So it's correlating all of these different data sources. So like, for example, I think it's interesting to overlay CrowdStrike versus Okta data often, right? This user is tied to this machine and it seems like they're logging on at anomalous locations, right? So there is a UEBA component as well here. That's another point solution that we're taking out.
Yeah, there's a great point. And I was just thinking about it. I guess, how do you balance? I mean, while I feel like I have some individuals that need daily reminders about training, how do you balance it so that people don't get like numb or just get, I guess, overtraining fatigue?
Yeah, nobody wants to do training. And when I say nobody, I'm saying the average person in the average American corporation, at least, right? And I think people get rewarded for behaving properly and protecting the company's interest, right? So people get rewarded, they can behave out of training, basically, right? They can, for the low risk people, which we are the only company that can quantifiably prove in enterprise environments who are the low risk employees. For those people, they receive far less training. And it's actually Dune Security is a massive sell to the COO of the company too, because we can boost efficiency in that way and return countless hours back to the company. But yeah, I mean, for the high risk people, it's sometimes for the 3 to 5% of people that are proving themselves to be careless or ignorant. What do you do, right? If maybe they just don't care. I think there's a lot of different solutions. It depends on the industry and the company, but performance management is one solution for some companies. Other more security focused solutions could be, maybe ratcheting up the email controls for this person, maybe disabling links, for example, within emails for that person, which you can do within some of the email security solutions, or just depermissioning them from sensitive resources, right? So there's really a myriad, unlimited number of approaches, but we provide that data and the capability.
Now, you guys are taking a very interesting approach. So as we kind of wrap up, are there any, I guess, parting thoughts that you want to leave the CISOs with of, how to rethink the whole security awareness landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny. It's kind of like how Abnormal came out a few years ago and said the SEG is dead. Similar for us, I think security awareness training as it's understood today is completely dead. There has to be an end-to-end user-centric security company for enterprise, and we think it's going to be Dune Security. And so we're happy to help in the security journey of many companies in the U.S. and abroad.
David, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.